Hi. When we're talking about crushing our depression, destroying it, becoming undepressed, getting ourselves out of that feedback loop of apathy and numbness or anxiety and frustration, we're talking essentially about changing our state of being. And what we can ask ourselves is, what are the necessary conditions for change to occur? And what is preventing those conditions from appearing? What is preventing me from creating the environment and the conditions that I need to change and shift? So there is a principle that governs, or shall we say informs, how change happens within the human organism. And that is simply energy conservation. Our body has got to do a million things all of the time, and it really does not want to spend a ton of extra time doing new shit. Unless you're someone that is kind of addicted to novelty, but that's sort of a different thing. We'll get there. So when it comes to changing our physical behaviors and habits, the ones that are most ingrained, our sleep, our nutrition, our diet, our movement, our communication patterns, how we emotionally react and respond, our psychological patterns, all of these things, they get into a groove. And you may be familiar with the idea that these neural pathways of these actions, of these behaviors, are literal little grooves, electrical signals that are taking this well-worn path. And in order for that signal to change its path, it needs a good reason, essentially. Or it needs to be done in a way that doesn't feel like change so much, that is small enough and close enough to what you are already doing that it doesn't read to your body system as a threat or as a really unnecessary use of energy. So we can look at this sort of in a less moralistic and also less emotional lens, right? It's so easy to get absorbed in a narrative about ourselves that we're depressed and anxious because we're not trying hard enough, we're not good enough, we're not brave enough, we're not strong enough, we're not a good enough of a person, we don't have whatever magical talents and qualities we think it is that those other people that are successful in the way that we want to be successful have. There's so many stories, and I think there is such value in completely throwing all of that out and getting a little mechanical and practical, almost like an engineer, when it comes to viewing your own processes and your own, how you're self-analyzing yourself to enable change and growth. And I say that as a deeply, deeply emotional person who feels things very intensely. My emotions and my spiritual relationship to life are very vivid and very intense. And I do take cues from my emotions and from my insights and my intuition, and that's good. But I didn't start there. Like when I tried to start, when I was in my first, shall we say, like big rock bottom breaking point of depressed, anxious, and the material and social conditions of my life and environment of my life was so destructive and so harmful and scary that I knew something had to change, or I was just going to continue to disintegrate. And it was bad. It was a situation where I didn't feel like the only choice was to do something constructive. And I made that choice, and I'm so grateful that I did. And I think there are elements at play and how and why I was able to make the choices that I did that are maybe beyond my understanding. But what I can look back on and objectively say, there were certain things that I believe really, really worked and really helped for universal reasons, because they were in accordance with universal principles and the laws of nature. So energy conservation is, again, this idea that everything takes lots of energy, and energy is all around us, but it is in our system's best interests much of the time to be very judicious and conserve energy and not expend it willy-nilly. And whenever we try to learn a new skill or perform a new task or have a new experience, it kind of takes a little bit more. So this is where the idea of very small changes comes into play, and editing your known behaviors in a way that's almost imperceptible to your overall system, but that is just nudging you in the right direction. So for example, if you have a habit of late night snacking that disrupts your sleep and spikes your blood sugar and makes you feel like crap in the morning, and you know you really shouldn't do it, you throw that stuff away. You simply stop buying those things and stop keeping them around the house. So now you wake up and you go for that late night snack. It's not even available to you. And you didn't have to make a huge effort in that moment in the middle of the night to not eat something that you want to eat. It's just the fact that your fridge is full of food that you have to cook in order to eat. So now you're not going to do it. Or you replace the snack with something that's not going to spike your blood sugar or have the same effect. It's like beef jerky rather than potato chips, right? So that's just a very basic example. Now, there is something to occasionally making really big changes and doing it like across the board. And I have done that as well. Sometimes those changes are a really great boost to kind of get you going, make you feel positive momentum. But at least for me, it is the smaller, more gradual shifts that stayed the longest in my system and are now like fundamental operating systems that my body is so comfortable with that it doesn't take very much effort to do them anymore, right? So appreciating that when your body doesn't want to do stuff or you're finding it hard to get yourself to do these new things, there is a good reason for that. And it's this sort of, again, this mechanical understanding of energy conservation. So if you know that, then you can make it less emotional and less moral and less of this existential frustration for yourself. And you can look at it from a more analytical framework of, okay, I just need to make the change that I'm trying a little bit smaller this time. Maybe I just went a little too big and I don't have the mental energetic reserves in order to make this big shift happen right now. It just needs to be a smaller shift. And I'll handle that and I will nail that. And that will give me the little positive feedback loop. I'll get used to doing it this way. And then I can incorporate the next change, the next thing. So have to shout out James Clear, the author whose blog really introduced me to this concept over 10 years ago. And he eventually wrote a book called Atomic Habits that breaks this down very thoroughly. Go read his blog, read the book. It just, if this concept speaks to you and it's helpful to you, it really, really, really helped me. And again, we can think of it, I think sometimes we get overwhelmed by the potential changes that we want to make because they do seem so big and so beyond our reach. And the way to bring something within your reach is to break it down into tiny constituent steps and take those one little step at a time, okay? This brings me to one other thing that I want to talk about today, which is the idea of something called hypnotic rhythm. This is an idea from the New Thought author, self-help dude, Napoleon Hill, who wrote the very successful 1930s book, Think and Grow Rich, as well as successive works. The one that I'm referencing here is called Outwitting the Devil. Hill's work is really, really, really good. It is the kind of stuff that you read it. It's very confrontational. You're going to be like, what? And yeah, it's about getting that cash. It's about making money. But he talks about these principles of behavior, perspective, and action that are applicable to anyone trying to accomplish anything worth doing. Cannot recommend him enough. So what is hypnotic rhythm? Hypnotic rhythm is the feedback loop of passivity that we get stuck in that our habits create. So the hypnotic rhythm of destructive or corrosive habits, habits that are not in congruence or in harmony with the person that you are trying to become, these habits create a rhythm, and this rhythm operates on energy conservation. We're in this loop because it is the path of least resistance for our brains and our psychology and our physiology to perform. So when you get pulled into a rhythm of a certain type of behavior that is, again, not in harmony with who you're trying to be, it creates this rhythm. So when you notice yourself in this rhythm, this pattern, number one, noticing it, just the ability to notice it, is very powerful. And I'm really compelled by the idea that just one small act of novelty can disrupt that rhythm and help you completely break out of it. Completely. And it doesn't have to be an action that you'd ever perform again, even. I believe there is a lot of power in simply being able to recognize, hey, I'm doing the same thing that I always did. What if in this one instance, this one time, I just do the opposite? I just do the opposite of what I usually do. And it's not even that hard to figure out. It's like, okay, well, when this happens, I usually go smoke a cigarette. But this one time, I am going to immediately run to the park and just like run around the field and scream or dance or something, whatever. But if you can interrupt, if you can notice the rhythm and interrupt it by doing something that you just would never usually do, I think it can create such a little, like, a mini explosion in your system that it can just help sort of jostle you out. And then you can sort of back off, reassess, and go back to your little small adjustments. I want to leave you with that. These things, change is this thing that, I guess I'm not going to leave you with that. I'm going to keep talking. Change, development. I believe in our ability to change so deeply because I have changed. And I like the term expansion because my core self, my soul, my inner me has to some degree always felt the same. But the way that I relate to and engage with the world continues to shift in these really beautiful ways. And the person that I am now is definitely not a person that I thought that I could be 10 years ago or so. I couldn't even imagine. I had these little inklings, these desires for this vague more. But if you told me, well, you're going to be a nationally ranked strength athlete and you're going to have directed a feature film with name actors and you're going to be living in New York City and pursuing all of your dreams and meeting all kinds of cool people, and that would have been utterly mind-blowing to me back then. And I consider myself sort of like, I do have a little bit of a belief about myself that I'm kind of a slow bloomer, not a late bloomer, just a gradual, very gradual. By the time I'm like 55, I'm going to be just out of this world. But my point is, if you're 24 and you're watching this and you're already feeling behind, like, I'm 34. I'm about to be 34. I am still very young. But the amount of change that I accomplished in 10 years is absolutely astronomical. You are not behind. You are right on time. You are on your own path. And whatever little spark within you that is driving you forward, that's real. That's real, and it is pointing you in the direction you are supposed to go. Have faith in it. Trust yourself. Be relentless with your desire to pursue that spark and that fire. It's worth it. It's really, really worth it. And you can do it. Okay, have a great day. I'll see you next time.